I knew that many things had happened in Beijing without me. Tens of thousands of students had poured into the streets. And then on the day before my arrival in Beijing, the government published articles officially denouncing the student leaders as liars whose goal was to create turmoil. I really don't know what the Beijing students are going to respond to the really hostile and scaring April 26 editorial. When the train was approaching Beijing, I was quite anxious. None of us, when we volunteer ourselves and go to the street, none of us really imagine what is going to happen. Even now, coming together almost 5 years later, we were still sorting through the events of the spring of 1989. Wang Chaohua represented the intellectuals at that time. Wu Kaixi, he's very charismatic, so therefore a lot of people responded to his cause. Chai Ling, compared with other student leaders, was more like a spiritual leader. Wang Dan, who is still in China, took the lead and organized the initial demonstration from Beijing University to Tiananmen Square. Facing each other is to face ourselves. To see us out together immediately brings us back to the confusion of those exciting, hopeful, and ultimately painful days.
To me, I guess I'm the type of person who feel like I can't, if I don't do something for my country at this point, I'll be ashamed of myself the rest of my life.
就希望有这样的机会的话，学生能够起来为中国的民主做工作，所以我觉得我是起那种怎么说呢，就是把学生的热情调动起来。
Only the curiosity brought me to Tiananmen Square to watch what's going to happen. We certainly, all of us, have smelled something's going to happen. We decided to have April 27th as the Liberty Day for China. And I was in the very front of the demonstration. And we can see the feeling of joy in every face, which hasn't been there for 40 years.
It's amazing for me. So I thought that's the first time I thought it in such a way as if we might got some real results from such a disciplined student movement.
When I walk out at the gate of the Beijing train station, it was like late afternoon, and people were so excited and talking about the demonstration which just passed by a moment ago. That was the moment I was reassured that this time we were going to make a difference. But at the same time, I was also very scared because I know exactly what happened if you stand up in China and confront such an oppressive and all-powerful regime. Because I know what happened to my grandparents, to my parents, and to me earlier, so I don't have any illusions. This is the first time that the 200,000 students in Beijing got together. There were 3 times more people came out of their home to support the students by marching with them. Everybody realized that if we act in solidarity, we are powerful. We were all in our 20s and probably a little bit older, but equally innocent in terms of politics. And all of a sudden, by historical incidents, accidents, we were put in a position which we have to bear the responsibility of a fate of a country of 1 billion people. What's so genuine about this movement? It is more of an individual movement. Everybody have their own reason to be there.
for so many years. Every time we tried to make a difference, all we faced was suppression and punishment and the lie and propaganda. So I think at that moment, make a decision, enough is enough. Now is our time to do something.
I formed a strong friendship with student leaders like Chai Ling, Feng Zongde, and others. Because as soon as I arrived in Beijing, I began to go to every campus to talk to student bodies, to talk to student organizers. And by talking to them, I realized a lot of people had a similar thought. We needed to legitimize our movement with a democratically elected student leadership. Within a week, most of the major campuses held elections, and the central leadership was strengthened.
I try to be a representative from our own campus when Word Casey was there and asked us for our general strategy.
What students wanted is real basic things. One is officially withdraw the April 26th editorial. Number two is open, direct, and the equal dialogue with the government. It seems to some of you may be very simple and a very naive condition the student stated.
We knew that the government had never been in the habit of listening to the voice of the people. They will never do that. The two basic demands is a way of attempting to survive.
We are not trying to overthrow the government. We were not trying to have any violence. We want reform.
We wanted to generate enough pressure to put the government in the very awkward position of having to accept open dialogue with the students. So we organized various lively ways of demonstration to present our cause to the widest possible audience. But the real breakthrough came on May 4th, when journalists for the first time joined the demonstration. The press corps openly rebelled against the government, and through their truthful reporting, the demand of a dialogue with the government spread all over China and got widespread sympathy from all sectors. From that moment on, we began to present ourselves as more of a formidable force against the government. The government promised a dialogue, but each time they canceled the promised meetings, most of us began to realize that the government never intended to have a serious dialogue with the student representatives.
Usually, the government takes 3 steps to crack down a movement. First, editorial articles, and to basically name the movement as anti-revolutionary movement. And second, just crack down. And third, just arrest people or persecute people. And so we know what will come next.
But at the same time, the government refrained from cracking down on the movement. What held them back was Gorbachev's impending visit to Beijing. This was the first time in 30 years that China and the Soviet Union were going to hold a summit. A proposal of a hunger strike during Gorbachev's visit circulated among the students. Even to the most courageous, such a plan seemed too risky. Holding a hunger strike meant, in the eyes of the government, a declaration of independence by the students. It meant war.
At the time, I was quite confused on making this decision, either we should go to hunger strike or not, especially after an argument with Chao Hua and some other students.
There were also people who believed equally strongly that we could not let the government dictate our lives anymore.
We want to fight for our own rights to be a Chinese citizen, and we want to fight our basic right to be guaranteed from the Chinese Constitution that we have right to freedom of speech, freedom demonstration, freedom assembly.
You shouldn't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't think that's my. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Wang Chaohua and a number of others strongly believed that by starting such hunger strike, we would destroy the movement.
I had a heavy quarrel with Chailin right on the day before the starting of hunger strike. I think that many real citizens, they don't really want another 10 years. Mao Zedong, another 10 years riot.
With only 2 days before Gorbachev's scheduled arrival to Beijing, we decided to go ahead with the plans for hunger strike. The spokesperson of the hunger strike was Chailin. It was her speech on May 12th that finally moved enough people to join the demonstration.
When I gave the speech, there's one student who say, "It is my time to do something for my country. I want to join the hunger striker. China, I love you." And I think that was the feeling why the student joined the hunger striker.
Once we made the decision to go ahead with the idea of the hunger strike, the professors of Beijing University were so moved that they decided to throw a banquet, a last meal. And the teachers gave speeches of encouragement to us. People began to sing Internationale. Some students announced their last will. What went on in my mind was, what if nobody comes to support us on Tiananmen Square? The soldiers would come in, arrest all of us, and then we probably would just simply disappear. Our message would disappear. The movement would disappear. We marched for 2 hours on the road to Tiananmen Square. But unlike during most of the demonstrations, this time, a lot of people watched us in silence. Nobody knew what was going to happen in the hunger strike. It was very risky for everybody.
When people told us on the way to the hunger strike, if you really want to please the people, to bring yourself back from the Tiananmen Square safely and healthy, would please us.
一个开始是非常着急，4月份、5月份的时候，非常着急，就觉得他们两方面的人啊都很糊涂，都做了一些不太策略式，就是双方的头脑都不是很冷静，处理问题上都有问题。当然说主要责任还是在政府那个方面。
As soon as we entered Tiananmen Square, all of a sudden it was like my worst nightmare had come true. It was empty. Nobody was there except us. My heart became very heavy and I said, we must organize something immediately to get more people to come to support us. And by late afternoon, the first group of people began to come back carrying water, blankets, and more people came back with tents. And then gradually more and more people heard the news and came back to support us, and were willing to stay with us for the entire night. It was so exciting. I realized, at least for the first night, we would be safe. Gorbachev's visit brought a tremendous amount of hope. He was regarded as a hero, a true reformer. As a matter of fact, we issued a public invitation for him to come to speak at Beijing University. At the same time, the government was very, very nervous. They were most interested, obviously, in saving face by getting the students out of the square using whatever means necessary. Every evidence suggested that the government was actively preparing for the crackdown.
I wept, cried publicly, everywhere, trying to get students out of the square before Gorbachev's arrival. You don't have to tell people to get real reform for our life.
The first count I got of the hunger strikers is 1,040 people. and more people each day, every minute, wanted to join the hunger strike. And then starting from the third day, May 15th, many people began to faint. And we began to hear sirens running almost non-stop 24 hours a day. Also, May 15th was when Gorbachev would arrive in China. He brought with him an international press corps of about 3,000 journalists. But all the journalists were completely captivated by the student movement, and Gorbachev even became second-rate news. For the first time, we saw so many foreign journalists meeting around looking for stories.
Do you think the hunger strike will work?
I'm not sure, but I think we should go to the extreme. And yes, in China, for the first time, we also realized that the world was watching. Deng Xiaoping regarded Gorbachev's visit to Beijing as the highlight of his long-term political career. And now, Deng Xiaoping was very publicly humiliated. On May 16, Yan Mingfu, the Minister of Public Relations of a government and a famous reformer, came to see us. It was the first time a high-ranking communist official publicly supported the cause of the student movement. It was a highly emotionally charged conversation. He promised the government was going to deal with our request seriously as soon as Gorbachev left China. But by that time, the students especially became very suspicious about the government's motivation. At the same time, Communist Party General Secretary Zhao Ziyang, who was a strong reformer, told Gorbachev in a televised meeting that all decisions in China ultimately had to be made personally by Deng Xiaoping. That means that it was Deng Xiaoping who was preventing any dialogue from happening. A request that had by then gained wide support from across Chinese society. So on May 17th, the largest demonstration of the movement took place, maybe even the largest in Chinese history. As many as 2 to 3 million people went to the streets. People of all ages, people of all walks of life, people organized by their professions, by their working unit, all joined the demonstration. And there were simultaneous demonstrations in at least 150 cities across China. That was the turning point when the student movement became a people's movement, became a true national democracy movement. Then, early in the morning of May 18th, I was told that the government wanted to hold a dialogue with the students. From a public relations point of view, the government had to show the people how irrational students were and how rational the government was. So they decided to hold a public meeting in which Li Peng deliberately antagonized the students' representatives and showed their emotional response on camera.
我再次代表党和政府。
不是完全没有意义的，假定能够都做到的话，我们就有可能说服同学撤离。
What we ask is real basic things on the meeting with Prime Minister Li Peng.
而且，关于红十字会这个问题，我想请李总理以及在各。
And government really shouldn't refuse this kind of simple conditions.
The meeting ended in a contentious atmosphere. Prime Minister Li Peng threatened that the government would take appropriate action. Later that night, General Secretary Zhao Ziyang came to visit. He told the students in tears that he had come too late. Everything was too late. That suggested to us very strongly that there had been some fundamental change in policy. We began to see what was coming. We have sacrificed so much. We showed the purity of our hearts by causing great bodily harm to ourselves to make a statement, to tell the government, to tell the people that we are not a riot, and the student movement wanted to make China better. We continue to get information coming from various sources, all telling us the government will take appropriate action. The first thing came to my mind was we must immediately call off the 7-day-old hunger strike. And only 1 hour after we ended the hunger strike, Prime Minister Li Peng announced through the loudspeakers on Tiananmen Square that Beijing would be under the martial law as of 10 o'clock the next morning. "200,000 troops were surrounding Beijing.